I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
The more you talk, the harder I want to hit you.
I'm happy because of being here today. Fuck you.
Come on, you want me to drive? No. You're supposed to be suicidal, remember? I'll
Anybody
drive.
a drive?
Let's get in the car.
Fucking shit. Fuck me in the fucking ass. Fuck you, you fucking stupid cunt.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review. This review is going to be for the very last entry of the review series I'm doing. And that is going to be for 2023's the third, and well, hope for now, unless they do a fourth one, but I hope they don't. Because this one I felt ended the spin-off series perfectly. And even though Rocky is not in this movie, it's technically still part of the series because it's part of the spin-off series that's connected to the Rocky series. And that's going to be for none other than 2023's Creed 3, which is directed by Michael B. Jordan himself. Pretty much taking on the steps of when Stallone directed a few of the Rocky sequels. And Michael B. Jordan directs a third entry in his spin-off series, in an ironic way. So, what is the plot of Creed 3? So, after he's dominated the boxing world in Creed 1 and 2 from Rocky's training, Adonis Creed, still played by Michael B. Jordan, has been thriving in both his career and family life. Eventually, a childhood friend of his and former boxing prodigy named Damien, played by Jonathan Majors, resurfaces after serving a long sentence in prison, and he wants to prove that he deserves a shot in the ring. So the face-off between former friends ends up being more than just a fight. Adonis needs to settle the score and put his future on the line to battle Damien, a fighter with nothing to lose. So, as my reaction to Creed 3. So, when I first heard this film was announced, I was not too hyped for it because I felt it wasn't really necessary because Creed 2 was kind of a fine enough ending for Creed himself. Back then it was. Well, I thought it was back then. To the point where, was this really needed? But I did eventually, although I ended up, after hearing it was a little better than expected, despite not having Rocky in the movie, I did end up seeing the film when it had first come out, like 2.5 years ago. Soon to be 3 years, actually. And, well, I was surprised by it, actually. And yeah, and I will say this, I still prefer this over the first Creed movie as well. I slightly prefer Creed 2. I almost like this as much as Creed 2. But, nah, actually, I would put this in 6th place. I would say Rocky Balboa is still better than this movie. And Rocky, obviously, 4, 2, and 1 are still better than this movie. I would put this as 6th place for the list. But it thankfully turned out to be better than expected. And it's got a nice idea of Creed, having one last score to settle, like an old childhood friend of his, having to settle a score from that. Yeah, so how was Creed 3 made? So a third Creed film had got announced in September 2019 with Michael B. Jordan's return, and he would also be directing the movie, which was announced on October 2020. And Jonathan Majors and the other cast joined in between November 2021 and September 2022, and Creed 3 is the first film series not to feature Stallone as Rocky Balboa. But to be fair though, unlike John Rambo where Stallone is not involved, the John Rambo prequel, well, guess what? Stallone didn't star in the movie as Rocky, but he still produced it. He was still the producer. And something? Some people are bothered Rocky's not in this movie, but honestly, I can see why he's not. Because Creed 2 Rocky already had a fine enough send-off to retire the character where he goes back to make peace with Robert, meets his grandson. It's better to just leave it there. It's just better to let his end. It's better we leave his ending be. That was a perfectly fine enough last visual shot of the character, and I'm glad they kind of left it there and didn't try to did not try to fuck it up. So that's one of the things I like what Michael B. Jordan did with this film. I liked he did not touch Rocky's happy ending and actually left it be. And Stallone still did produce the movie, so he still had some involvement with the film. At the very least, he still was somewhat involved. Didn't star in the movie, but he still produced, but he still was one of the producers. Filming had began in January 2022 and lasted until April 2022, and filming locations were in Los Angeles, Tampa, and Georgia. And after Creed 3 is officially shot and advertised, Creed 3 would premiere in Mexico on February 9, 2023, for Jordan's 36th birthday, and was released in the United States on March 3rd, 2023, and was the first one to be distributed by MGM after it got purchased by Amazon, and a disillusion of United Artists releasing. The movie, when it released, it got, once again, like the others, got highly positive reviews from critics for Michael B. Jordan's direction, the story, performances, and fight scenes, and it was a box office success. It made more than the other Creed films, made over $276 million worldwide, and was the highest grossing Creed film. Unfortunately, I think a 4th film is in development, but I kind of wish it wasn't. And we'll get to why I wish there was not a Creed 4. Why they would not make a Creed 4. But let's review this movie first. So, here are the good qualities in the story of Creed 3. So, for those who are fans of Rocky, it should sound familiar that box work would be a speed area, but structurally, Creed 3 doesn't do much to really break it, but it doesn't need to. Michael B. Jordan understands the formula that brought success to the franchise with the film's strengths. To bring something fresh to this, 9th entry in the franchise, you have to get what works about it to really add something new. And one of the strengths the movie does that the characters around Adonis are foils for his struggles. They're not limited to that role, and each of them get their own agency to certain the story being told. Bianca is kind of there challenging, but also portrays someone dealing with issues in a healthier, productive way. Marianne here does make some mistakes, but at least has her reasons and owns her responsibility for them in some of her final moments in this movie. And for Michael B. Jordan's directional debut, Creed 3 is a very confident directional debut for Michael B. Jordan, and shows he's really achieved a mastery of the formula that brought the series success. And pretty much taken on the mantle of, when Stallone directed Rocky 2, Rocky 3, Rocky 4, Rocky Balboa. Now Michael B. Jordan's directing the 3rd entry in his spin-off series. And the characters, the storyline, the emotional mood are still spot on, with enough of the boxing fights for everyone to enjoy. Now, it's slightly not as good as Creed 2, but it still portrays positive morals and family relationships. It's not really as good as either Rocky 1, 2, 4, or Balboa either, but you know what I mean. So how do we start off? So we start off with a bit of a flashback in 2002, where after Adonis was released and adopted by Mary Ann 4 years before that, Adonis sneaks out with his best friend and brother, Golden Gloves champion Diamond Dame Anderson, to watch him compete in an underground boxing match. So after Dame's victory, though, eventually he tells Donnie about inspirations that he wants to be a professional fighter and become a world champion. So eventually they stop at a liquor store, and Dame takes this overboard because he sees this man and he attacks him, and Adonis is freaked out and escapes, while Dame is left to be arrested. And then we get to years later, where it's years after beating Victor Drago, and after beating Ricky Conlan to avenge his only career defeat, Adonis eventually decides to retire from boxing and start his new family life. Bianca and their 6-year-old daughter Amara, who's had a hearing impairment, has led the family to become fluent in American Sign Language. And Donnie is running his gym now, called the Telpe Boxing Academy, with Tony Evers Jr. as pretty much promoting his prodigy, like the world champion Felix Agoro Chavez, in a match against Victor Drago. So Victor Drago was still and actually they don't write out Victor Drago. They still acknowledge his existence. He's still briefly in a film for a few brief little glimpses. But Felix is pitted in a match against Drago. And the two watch in declining health. Adonis' adopted mother, Mary Ann, who is now going through a few strokes and eventually does move in with them. And Amara wants to become a boxer like Donnie, but unfortunately, though, this gets Amara in trouble at school because she punches a bully. As the kind of our first act is going, establishing how life for Adonis has been ever since the events of Rocky II, and after several successes, he's now going to retire as a boxer and focus on it because he now has a wife and a daughter. Focus on his family life now. And things are going pretty smooth. And one of the most clear parts of this movie occurs in the final boxing battle that I'll get to later. We kind of see the minds of the two opponents inside, all the factors filtered out. It does get presented as somewhat of a comic style, but it still feels very surreal. It's still creative. It's still effective. It's not all goofily over the top. The boxing is still brilliantly shot and super engaging. And the film, kind of like Creed 2, is also more character-driven and less about the fights. Or pretty much, Creed 3 kind of starts off with rematching Adonis and Ricky Conlon. And there's smaller ones, but they're greater before the big match between the old friends and rivals. And the last match does feel very personal, and I like how personal it feels in the movie, how it's directed and makes in between the two, and the punches feel very real. And it's exactly what you would probably expect from a sports drama, a boxing drama. The franchise is known for a lot of training. The Rocky franchise, is known for a lot of training sequences, and the training sequences in this one, I actually think are better than the training sequences in 1 and 2. Right here. The training sequence in Creed 3 definitely felt a little more Rocky than the training sequences in 1 and 2 did. It doesn't really have the Rocky theme, but the training sequences still definitely had the more Rocky vibe. They were a little less hip-hop worthy, and they actually felt more like their own thing. It doesn't let us down. It gives us motivational sequences and music that really fits the story and the characters, and a little sparring match between Creed and Drago in the film, though Drago's not in the movie that much. The last film, it showed Adonis and Bianca starting a family, and this one, it continues on from there, and we see more of the fatherhood through the perspective of Adonis. Someone from his dark past coming back, and those memories come back to haunt him, and going through many more emotional consequences he has to kind of grow from. The storyline is great, and we understand it, and actually we even further understand Adonis in this movie. Michael B. Jordan, even in direction, captures every emotion, every scene perfectly well, both acting and directing. So, Dame, his childhood friend, eventually gets released from prison around this time, and he meets up with Adonis, reconnects with him, and wants to go back to doing boxing. And Adonis is a little reluctant about it at first, but eventually decides to let Dame join the gym, and he hires him as Chavez's sparring partner, but eventually his presence draws scorn from Chavez and Duke because Dame is very aggressive and hostile. And he later goes to Adonis' house and he meets Adonis' family and recounts their time together, which Bianca never heard. And Dame eventually asks for a title shot against Chavez, but Adonis doesn't want to go through with it. But Drago has been attacked by an unknown person at a party for the record label Bianca had made and was being celebrated for. So he gets doubt in the ability to participate in upcoming fights, but Adonis then nominates Dame as Drago's replacement, and while it's the first professional bout, Dame does win the Unified Heavyweight Championship because Dame does these really dirty moves, like with the knee and elbow, and targets Chavez's shoulder, and Dame actually damages it on purpose during one of their sessions, so at this point, you can kind of... I think Jonathan Majors now... When it comes to Jonathan Majors, the whole controversy with him, I can't really follow it. I can't really pick a side. Some say he's guilty, or some say he's innocent. Some said he was guilty, some said he was innocent. So, back then around the time this was all happening, I couldn't really pick a side, really. So, I couldn't really believe much of the story either way. But regardless how people feel about Jonathan Majors... Jonathan Majors really captures the role of Dame perfectly well. I think he does terrific with the character. He really targets like Dame's anger. You can kind of see why Dame is angry with Adonis because Adonis did kind of leave him there to be arrested, to take the fall. Despite the fact that Adonis kind of was there with him. And pretty much now, it's kind of really just a ploy to try to even reconnect with him because he does want some payback on Adonis. And pretty much by not like fight kind of payback, but actually more like career damage in a way. Like damage his reputation. So he pretty much damages Chavez, puts him in the hospital, and like when there's those little cringy bits when they try to take out his mouth guard and his teeth are like bleeding on it. So which was a very realistically well shot shot right there. But Chavez ends up being hospitalized, and Tony Evers Jr. Blames Adonis for this and tells him to stay out of the gym for a while. And Adonis then goes to visit Mary Ann, and it turns out the letters Dame had written to Adonis while in prison were kept away from him because she thought he was a bad influence. And one letter has this picture that shows Dame with a fellow inmate that Donnie recognizes Drago's assailant. And it turns out Dame planned the attack the whole time. And so Adonis goes to confront him on that. And Dame admits that he manipulated him to getting the title shot. And right there. And so he basically then beats up Adonis at the place he's meeting him at. And then Adonis, when he gets back, he's unable to admit to Bianca his guilt. And revels pretty much in his newfound fame and slanders Adonis as a fraud that turns back. So this is kind of where the story takes a dark turn. Like, I'm amazed how they filmed the boxing scenes here to make them feel so real, and film this act here real. The scenes that really show the two of them alone are definitely very effective and offer this perspective of how the fight is for both the men. And Creed, this one, he now gets caught in a dilemma that's not of his own making here. The cinematography during this whole plot is excellent. The dialogue that shows a strain on Creed and his family, and the turmoil drama this almost causes all of them. And you can guess how it's going to play out, and the boxing world can be very cruel. This movie really does show you that. There are some that obviously don't like the movie, and some just dislike it because there's no Rocky here, but there's a reason Rocky's not in the movie. His story's done. What else is there left to do with it? What else would they have did with Rocky in this movie? There's nothing left for Rocky. His story's done. The character's done. It's over for him. He passed the torch. His story's finished in the Creed movies. I'm just glad, honestly, I'm glad they didn't touch his happy ending. That last shot of him in Creed 2 is too perfect to continue. So there's a good reason he's not in the movie. Some may not like that, but I can understand why they don't put a movie. And at least Stallone still produced a film. It's not unlike the John Rambo prequel where he's not involved in that. It could have been worse. But Michael B. Jordan and Jonathan Majors are definitely great in this movie together. Their backstory gets set up nicely during the movie. I mean, it's definitely kind of the retired fighter forced into a long last fight story, but it is a story we have seen a lot of times, especially with the Rocky movies, but they managed to make the story so strong. You got the formulaic beats that feel appropriate. It's not trying to over-rely on the other movies. It's not borrowing elements from the other movies. This one definitely feels a little more original. You got an engaging build-up, effective final battle sequence. It elevates this is that at least, and I'm actually glad, this could have been, another, we're going to redo the Mr. T. We're going to have Mr. T have Clubber Lane have a son, and we're going to do that next. No, they actually pick an actual character from Adonis's past that has no connection to any of Rocky's opponents, no connection to Tommy Gunn, no connection to Clubber Lane, no connection to the guy from Rocky Balboa. This is a guy that was separately away from the Rocky franchise, who was never mentioned in the Rocky franchise. A guy that was part of Adonis's childhood. And that's a perfect way to go for the third Creed movie. So eventually, after some more drama for a little bit, Bianca calls Adonis that Marianne is suffering on a stroke, so he rushes home, and Marianne in spirit thanks Apollo for bringing Adonis back to her, and then she dies in Adonis's arms. Hey, no, I will admit, this was actually, honestly, like, with how they handled Marianne's death here, I feel like it worked best. I thought it was very emotional. It actually did bring a few tears to my eyes when Marianne died. Even though she didn't really have much to do in the films, but how they handled her death was actually emotional because, she found Apollo's son, and Apollo's son has now carried on his legacy well, and she can finally reunite with Apollo in this moment, and she goes out peacefully. And something? How they handled Marianne's death in this movie, this is how they should have handled Leia's death in The Rise of Skywalker, or The Fall of Skywalker. Way better handled here than it was in that movie. You want to know something? Because Marianne may not have did much in the films, but you know what? She was actually a character. She actually had scenes in the movie. Okay, she actually still had a bit of a role in the Creed films. Unlike with Leia's, where they just reused cycled scenes they shot of her before Carrie Fisher's death and just slapped them in the movie. And then basically, they kill her off like that. Which is honestly disrespectful to Carrie Fisher's legacy. And just insulting. Here, it's done well acted. It's well directed. They actually give a more proper, better send-off. She actually goes out in peace. Not trying to redeem a character that was like Kylo Ren, that was irredeemable. Because that guy killed Han Solo. So why should Kylo Ren have gotten any redemption? He should not have. And killed thousands of other innocent people. Unlike Darth Vader, the reason why Darth Vader got his redemption, and Anakin got his redemption, is because he had a troubled past. He was brainwashed by the Emperor. That's why he was pretty much, the Emperor was the real antagonist the whole entire time. It was actually a tragic figure that just got tricked into the dark side, as you saw in the prequels films. Okay, that's why Darth Vader's redemption worked. And he actually sacrificed himself to save Luke Skywalker when he realized who the Emperor really was the whole time, and he was tricked all this time. And he actually went out saving his son. That's why when they did it with Darth Vader, it was actually done well. It actually worked. That's why they did it with Darth Vader, because he was just a tragic figure that got brainwashed. He was basically a slave. Kylo Ren felt like none of that. But back to Creed 3. So after Marianne's funeral, Adonis then apologizes to Bianca for everything that's happened. And he confesses about the night Dame's arrest where it turns out the reason why he attacked Leon was because Leon was a very abusive caregiver in their group home before he got adopted. And Donnie attacked Leon at the liquor store. The brawl with Leon's friends caused Dame to brandish a gun, and that's what got Dame arrested. And Adonis felt guilt for this and never contacted Dame out of that. So here Adonis now finally is actually kind of realizing the mistakes he made here. And this causes to finally realize his guilt and open up about it. As the movie progresses, the creative team behind the camera expands, giving us these camera angles during the choreography. And during the final act, Michael B. Jordan makes it clear that there's some creatively and almost some dance-inspired visuals that they're with the unresolved black male trauma, and does it in a way that really seems perfectly well beyond. An interesting way of taking risks and bringing change to a 50-year-old franchise that ran for 9 movies, ran for 50 years. And a different method of showing the passage of time between rounds and dialogue between the two leads. Now, with here, the anime-influenced parts are definitely gorgeous here with the fights. And some may feel they don't work in a Creed film, but here I feel they actually do kind of work very well. And you see Adonis is scared about facing his past because of the guilt he goes through, but he realizes that he has to move on from the past, is that he has to really face it and move on. The bonds of friendship, the bonds of marriage, the bonds of mother and son, the bonds of father and daughter here. It's more than a relatable aspect that really does draw you in, and it does well at tugging at your heartstrings. And once again, like I said with the train montages, yeah, the train montages I feel are the best portrayed of the Creed films. I mean, they don't have the theme of the Rocky movies, but to me personally, they kind of feel like the train montages of the other films. And usually in Rocky movies, the rise of the conflicts really parallel the character's boxing journey, and once the protagonist's boxing journey feels there, and right there, the train montages definitely spelled a little more Rocky this time around. Alright, so now we get on with the finale of the movie. So, Adonis continues to be publicly taunted by Dame, but eventually Bianca encourages him to face him. Adonis decides he's going to come out of retirement and challenge Dame for the championship, and Dame accepts it. So after he trains with Duke Evers Jr. and a recovered Drago, Donnie faces Dame in the Battle of Los Angeles at Dodger Stadium. And so, once Donnie and Dame fight, the fight becomes very grueling and matched affair, and eventually by the final round, Donnie sees visions of the abusive foster home and his life in jail. And eventually Adonis gets knocked down, but he's able to beat the count, and he's able to knock Dame out and regain the championship. And then after that, Dame eventually apologizes to Dame, reconciles with him, and they admit and both of them admit both of them tell each other, it's not your fault what happened. Which I like that. Right here, this is the reason why I don't want a Creed 3, because this one was about Adonis having to face his past, overcome his past, and then finally make peace with his past. And right here, Adonis actually finally did all that. So hence why I don't think a Creed 4 would work. Because this film felt like a good send-off to Adonis Creed. Right there. So just leave it at Creed 3. And then the movie ends with Adonis then reconciling with Bianca and Mara, joining them in the ring, in the empty stadium, and he pretends to box with Mara for a brief little bit, and this was a nice little moment. And that's how Creed 3 ends. Adonis made peace with Dame, reconciles with Bianca and Mara, and finally gets closure from his past with Dame, and him and Dame made up. And this is a perfect spot to leave Creed. You don't need a Creed 4. You don't need a Rocky prequel. Leave it alone here. No more. Alright? Now, I'm not sure we really needed this movie either, but it was fine enough. It was fine to leave it here. Now you can leave it here now. Adonis Creed made up with his past, made peace with his past, and now he can finally retire for good, from fighting for good and actually be with his wife and daughter. Leave it here. It's perfectly finished. It's a perfect spot to leave Creed. Both Rocky and Creed stories are finished. To me, for here. Alright, so now do I have any bad qualities with Creed 3? Okay, yeah, sure, I do have some problems with Creed 3. The third act does feel a little rushed compared to Act 1 and 2. Like, we see Dame call out Adonis in a show, but then they're suddenly training, and then they're suddenly in the ring. There's not much of a conversation between Adonis and his wife, much in the film, but then we see her hugging him as he enters the ring, and he does still support him on his journey. It just feels like it's just kind of jumped randomly here, kind of just jumped without much development in Act 3. That's why I feel like more time should have been given to kind of delve deeper into relationships between the characters' own personal developments, maybe delve a little bit deeper into Adonis and Dame's past, kind of see Dame's past in jail, kind of see how his life in jail went, kind of see a little bit more how their abusive life with Leon went, That's what I kind of feel was missing. Maybe a bit more of that stuff. Maybe a bit more of Amara, Maybe a little bit more scenes of Marianne. Those are my problems I have with Creed 3. So other than those, though, I surprisingly enjoy Creed 3. Yeah, I do surprisingly enjoy Creed 3. I still thought it was worth the watch. So in the end, I would say Creed 3 is still worth a buy because personally I find it just as good as Creed 2 and some of the other films. Anyways, that's it for my view of Creed 3. And when I go in Creed 3, here's how I'm gonna rate this movie. So overall, if you want to see Adonis resolve his childhood past, then I would definitely watch and buy Creed 3 for your collection for sure, no doubt. And if we're not going Creed 3, I'm going to give Creed 3 an 8 out of 10. Alright, there we go, guys. That officially wraps up my review for Creed 3. And you can go back on the shelf. You go. And with that, guys, we are now officially done the Rocky and Creed movies. We reviewed all the movies. The review series is done. Just like that. 9 movies. All completed in the first bit of 2026. Now I want to know in the comments down below what you guys think about Creed 3. Whether you like this movie, whether you thought this film shouldn't have been made. Until then, guys, that will be it for this review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this, want to see more, don't forget to subscribe to Don G. Corleone.